Welcome to the news and why it matters. Happy Friday. I am Sara Gonzales, and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has sued pharmaceutical giant Pfizer for using highly misleading rhetoric to con Americans into getting the company's COVID-19 shot, despite its failure to, of course, prevent infection or transmissions. His office, Paxton's office, says that the jab violated the information about the jab violated the Texas Deceptive Trade Practices Act. And I just love, honestly, I love having an attorney general that every time I read a headline about him, I'm like, that's my attorney general. Yeah. So I wanted to bring him on himself to talk about it. Welcome to the program, General Paxton. So you launched an investigation. You announced that you were launching this investigation into Pfizer for violating this act about, almost 8 months ago. And then there was a thing that happened where a bunch of rhinos tried to get rid of you, probably for exposing exactly things like this. And not that I'm bitter about that. And so now here you are following up on this investigation. It sounds to me like the investigation yielded quite a bit of information for you.
Yeah, so it was interesting. 3 weeks after I announced this investigation, I was impeached. And so it took me out dealing with this for several months. But the first thing I did when I came back was told my staff, I want to get back on this. And we did. And the information that we got created enough information for us to file this lawsuit based on our belief that Pfizer was not honest about the effectiveness of it, arguing that it was 95% effective when maybe it was way less effective than that, potentially as little as 1%, and not disclosing some of the side effects of the drug and not being honest about the fact that the drug was not, or the vaccine was not effective.
So I pulled the petition here, and it was interesting. So I was reading, I'm going to read some of this. First, Pfizer's widespread representation that its vaccine possessed 95% efficacy against infection was highly misleading from day one. That number was only ever legitimate in a solitary, highly technical, and artificial way. It represented a calculation of the so-called relative risk reduction for vaccinated individuals in their clinical trial. And I noticed what you guys did here, which I very much appreciated, is you go on to talk about the relative risk reduction and why it's misleading. But what you do here is that you're using actually the FDA's own publications against them by saying actually the FDA is the one who says that all of these relative risk reductions are a bunch of baloney. And so now, how can anyone disagree with you? You're using the FDA of all places.
Hey, look, it's the truth, and the reality is Pfizer didn't even follow what they said, and it's not even close to 95%. So that's why I was using the number 1%. If they used the numbers that the FDA said they should use, it was more like the vaccine was effective 1% or less of the time. That's not an effective vaccine, and that is not what they told my constituents. It's not what they told the American public, and many people made decisions about healthcare decisions based on what Pfizer told them. And obviously they were being pressured by the federal government as well. And look, does the federal government know this information too? That's going to be an interesting question that we'll hopefully find out in the process of this litigation.
Discovery is an interesting thing. So you also point out in this lawsuit, which I think is so crucial, you said more Americans died in 2021 with Pfizer's vaccine available than in 2020, the first year of the pandemic. This in spite of the fact that the vast majority of Americans received a COVID-19 vaccine, with most taking Pfizer. And then you go on to say, indeed, by the end of 2021, official government reports showed that in at least some places, a greater percentage of the vaccinated were dying from COVID-19 than the unvaccinated. I mean, when you talk about the biggest scams in modern American history, I cannot think of one bigger than this. So a couple questions kind of dovetailing off of that. Number one, I know, unfortunately, the way that it is sometimes it comes down to the judge, the county, the district, whatever, as to how successful this will be. What do we know about, this is what, the district court in Lubbock County, Texas? That sounds promising.
Yeah, I think we're hopeful. We have good judges in Texas. We have good federal judges in Texas. We also have a good appeals court. So no matter what happens, I'm guessing, whether we lost or Pfizer lost, it's going to the fifth court. That gives us some confidence. You end up drawing a 3-judge panel, so you never know exactly how that's going to go. But I wouldn't, and this is a big enough case, this affects the entire country. Whether this was something that harmed the American public, I think potentially could go to the U.S. Supreme Court. We'll see. But I think we have a really good argument. And I think at the very least, a lot of information is going to come out that was hidden. And I think Americans have a right to know this because they have a right to know what happened to them and how their decisions were affected by this information and what they're going to do in the future if we end up in a similar situation. They certainly will know they can't trust the drug companies and potentially the federal government that threatened people with their jobs, including military personnel that were required to get it or get kicked out of the, out of the armed services. And then, of course, we had lawsuits against OSHA and other agencies regarding this very issue, trying to protect people so that they could make their own healthcare decisions.
Yeah. So what are the potential legal ramifications for, if a judge does find, which it's very clear here. I don't know how you guys could have laid it out more clearly. All of the facts that you've listed, indisputable facts that you've listed, showing that they clearly violated this act. But if the judge does rule in your favor, what could Pfizer possibly be facing?
So it's $10,000 per violation. So each time they lied about this and each time they lied to a particular person, I mean, the damages could be great. That's all we can do. I have no criminal liability. I have no ability to go after criminal liability, but I can hold them accountable. It's one of my 4 jobs under the Texas Constitution is to make sure that our consumers are not defrauded. And in this case, it looks to me pretty clearly like Pfizer defrauded the consumers of Texas. There's, how many people got the vaccine, how many people were misled, could be a pretty large number. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, if anything else, too, you're doing what you can to get the process started. What might come of other things that you may or may not find out in the process, perhaps?
Well, I have 2 hopes. One is that other states will pursue this, and that'll allow more information to come out.
Exactly.
And then second, I hope the federal government will change the law. I hope Congress will change the law because right now they can develop these vaccines and there's no liability. So they don't have to do any testing, which I don't think they did in this case. And they can lie about it, and there's still no liability federally. There ought to be some limitation on at least telling the truth. If you know that your vaccine's not effective, that you should not be able to have protection under federal law where you can't be sued if you're actually knowingly lying about your vaccine and the results of your vaccines. That seems very harmful to the American people. So I'm hoping that potentially there could be some changes in federal law so that Americans are protected from this in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I appreciate you always fighting for us. It's hard to find these days. I know we're gonna talk in the show about the DeSantis-Newsom debate and George Santos being expelled, but I just feel like the overall feel of this show today is like we don't have fighters. We have a bunch of do-nothing Republicans who just want to go after their own based off of, fraudulent claims and non-investigations and closed door meetings. And not that you are familiar with anything like that. You're not familiar with fighting back against anything like that.
Well, exactly. And look what happened to me over the last, over the summer when you had these Republicans were at the end of session. They had not passed border security issues. They did not pass school choice. They had not passed enough property tax relief. Instead, they devoted the last couple of days to impeaching me and stopped all my lawsuits against the federal government, stopped my Pfizer lawsuit, stopped my lawsuit against the Biden administration. They stopped a lot of things from going on that were good. I don't understand those Republicans.
Exactly. Well, those of us actual real Texans, we appreciate you so much. We appreciate you always being the fighter that we need. And I appreciate your time, sir. I hope you come back soon.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Come back.
If you like that clip, there is plenty more where that came from. Click the link in the description below to subscribe to the News and Why It Matters YouTube channel to watch the full episode.